Good morning, everybody. Obviously, 10 years after Teresa's disappearance, we find that within Manitowoc and the surrounding area, the Fox Valley, as it's called, the same bad journalists are still in operation, 10 years later. We see some of the appalling parroting of Ken Kratz by some of the journalists. And it's a real shame that there were very few quality journalists in Manitowoc reporting about Making a Murderer when it was first released. Of course, the one shining example of a quality journalist is John Ferak, who wrote literally dozens and dozens of articles. And it's interesting that when I confronted Sheriff Herman with, why did you not talk to John Ferak? He said, "Oh, I chose who I want to speak to," and put me straight and said, "No." But on this one occasion, when Zellner had filed her original post-conviction motion for retesting of stuff, Robert Herman says, "Well, actually, no, it wasn't John Ferak, it was Alison Durr." Anyway, but clearly Robert Herman was not going to be wanting to speak to John Ferak, who would, as we know, also investigated the Ricky Hochstetler death. And so when John Ferak left the Manitowoc area in order to take up a new job in his hometown of Joliette, I thought, oh, that's a shame. It's he's the best journalist covering the case. Lack of photos mars the Avery investigation. It was absolutely brilliant, and a lot of other articles as well that he did about the case. As I say, I thought, oh, that's a shame. It's going to be we're going to be deprived of a journalist who is making waves there in Manitowoc. I needn't have worried. Of course, being in Joliette, once you look at the geography, you realise how close Joliette is to Kathleen Zellner's law office. I then messaged him, and he messaged me back before the book was actually out. He said, "I am working on a book with Kathleen Zellner, who is determined to try and find the real killer." He said, "I go every couple of weeks to sit with Zellner and write the book." The book being, of course, The Wrecking Crew, demolishing the case against Stephen Avery. We know that the Sheriff's Department talked about how to deal with Stephen Avery. We hear Kenneth Peterson say it would be easier to kill him than to frame him. There's no doubt there is an assassination unit within the Sheriff's Department, and whether they actually do it themselves or they manage to get others to do their dirty work for them, who knows. Anyway, what I did want to do today was to share a couple of few paragraphs from this book, which I thought were of particular interest because it deals with, obviously, the number one suspect in this case, Thomas Kocourek, who had so much to lose. Pop that up there. Let's pop that back up to the top. I've got a couple of pages here. Starting at page 87. Because of the 1985 Avery prosecution was a sham from the get-go, the Manitowoc sheriff was growing increasingly paranoid. He was willing to target anybody who posed a threat at blowing his cover. In 1990, as Steve was serving his unjust attempted murder prison sentence, Kocourek got wind of someone in town who was not convinced of Steve's guilt. Now, freedom of speech may be afforded by the US Constitution, but the following information obtained from a Manitowoc County Sheriff's Police report reveals the dangers of speaking out in a small town where law enforcement runs roughshod over the citizenry. One man in Manitowoc was threatened with arrest and felony charges if he made his beliefs known again about Avery's innocence. In March 1990, Kocourek, the sheriff himself, wrote up a formal report classifying the incident as harassment. According to the sheriff, a customer of the Bernstein's confectionery candy store stopped inside and asked if co-owner Penny Bernstein was there. She and her husband were out of town at the time. The customer, Eric Moan, 33, told the store clerk he was a friend of Steve and that Steve was innocent of assaulting the candy store lady. A week later, the sheriff of Manitowoc County made a personal visit to Maureen's residence on South 38th Street in Manitowoc. Quote, Eric stated that he was in fact at Bernstein's confectionery several days ago and had stopped in to purchase some chocolates. He stated that he meant no harm and only wanted to tell Penny Bernstein that, in his opinion, Stephen Avery was innocent, Kocourek reports reflected. The sheriff who had framed Steve also knew about Gregory Allen, the dangerous sexual predator who was allowed to get away with the near-fatal assault and remain a danger to the community at large. Yet this is how Kocourek summarized his exchange with Maureen. Eric admitted that he had no new factual data that was not already brought out during the trial, and that the belief of Stephen Avery being innocent was only a personal belief on his part. I advised Eric that his presence at the store in attempting to contact Penny Bernstein reference this case could be interpreted as a felony charge reference harassing a witness. Eric was warned that any future attempts to contact the Bernstein family and discuss the matter would result in felony charges being brought against him. He was also informed that if he had any new information that was not already brought out at the trial, that he should contact the Sheriff's Department, which was the investigating agency, and we would be glad to look into that information. Eric stated that he understood, Kocourek wrote. Obviously, Kocourek's report was a web of lies. He was not about to reopen the rape investigation, and he most certainly was not about to investigate somebody else as the rapist. Rather, the sheriff's face-to-face interview with the local man served a higher purpose. Kocourek had iced the concept of Avery's innocence from gaining traction around Manitowoc. For him, this was an important event, much more so than punishing real criminals. In the days following the brutal attack along Lake Michigan's beach, the traumatized rape victim began receiving anonymous, threatening phone calls at her house from the rapist, Gregory Allen, who was notorious for calling his victims afterwards. But Sheriff Kocourek convinced the candy store owner not to worry. She was just confused. Avery was already in jail, he informed her. Rather than trust her own instincts, she believed the sheriff. And what could she do anyway? Because the residents of Manitowoc County were in no position to rise up and oust Kocourek from office, he remained the most powerful politician of Manitowoc County for many more years to come. Finally, when the numbers lined up for him to collect his police pension, he decided to leave the office on his own terms. In 2000, he decided to pass the torch of corruption to someone else. But his heir apparent, Ken Peterson, still didn't know where all the bodies were buried and all the skeletons were being hidden. The Manitowoc County Master needed to let his understudy in on one more devious secret. Once again, all things centered on the high-profile rape conviction of Avery from the 1980s. At the time, Avery was pushing 40 and in the middle of his prison term behind the walls at the Wisconsin Department of Corrections. As for the retiring sheriff, Kocourek was cutting cakes, receiving going away gifts and bidding his farewells to fellow county government employees and local dignitaries as part of his grand farewell retirement send-off. And now that Peterson had earned the outgoing sheriff's sacred trust, the time arrived to make Peterson aware of a secret document being kept inside a special safe, a safe to which only the sheriff of Manitowoc County had access. Now, although the sheriff's office had a large vault where it housed thousands of old records for major criminal cases over the years, this particular report was apparently off limits to the rest of the sheriff's employees. The secret document turned out to be a letter purportedly written by a prison inmate outlining an alleged confession that convicted prisoner Avery gave to the inmate regarding the 1985 rape of Penny Bernstein. The letter was mentioned as part of Avery's $36 million civil rights lawsuit. It was more unflattering testimony about Kocourek, and the topic of the letter's existence came up just a couple of weeks before Teresa vanished and was killed. Quote, he said some inmate from Brown County sent it to him, Peterson testified. That's all I know. I don't know if it came direct or where it came from. All I know is it was there. Regardless of how it was contrived, the letter in the sheriff's safe was phony. In reality, Steve has never confessed to raping Penny Bernstein. He maintained his steadfast innocence since his arrest by Kenneth Peterson on July 29th, 1985. On September the 11th, 2003, the gates of the Wisconsin Department of Corrections swung wide open as a large contingent of well-wishers shared hugs, kisses, and tears with Steve. Attorney Keith Finley of the Wisconsin Innocence Project had secured a DNA exoneration proving Gregory Allen was the real beachfront rapist, just as the more reputable City of Manitowoc Police Department suspected all along. 2 years later, during October 2005, Avery's tenacious civil lawyers from Milwaukee, Walt Kelly and Stephen Glynn, were pounding away at the tainted Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office. The agency's upper administration was uneasy and uncomfortable. The scrappy civil attorneys were making substantial progress as they assembled their case against Manitowoc County and Sheriff Kocourek, the suspected crook and mastermind of Avery's 1985 frame job. That month, the following employees got pulled off the job and were paraded into a Manitowoc law office, where they were forced to raise their right hand and be subjected to an uncomfortable videotaped civil rights lawsuit deposition. Sheriff Ken Peterson, Lieutenant Detective James Link, Road Patrol Sergeant Andy Colburn, former Sheriff's Deputy Judy Dvorak, and retired Chief Investigation Jean Crichet. Dvorak would reveal how she despised Avery, who had no history of any sexual violence, but did have a solid alibi to account for his whereabouts during the time of Gregory Allen's rape. At most of these lawsuit depositions sat a short, stubby man who was not dressed in a suit and tie, like the room full of lawyers and key members of the sheriff's office, such as Peterson and Link. Avery's unsightly presence at the same table as members of the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office had to be sickening to them. The clock was ticking closer and closer to the scheduled deposition of the master himself, retired Sheriff Tom Kocourek. What would he have to say for himself when he found himself seated at the same wooden table, sitting in the very same room as the unfortunate man from whom he had stolen 18 years of his life? I think you'll agree, quite powerful, interesting stuff. Obviously, we like John Ferak and his style of writing. And John has very kindly, if you check up with Erecozy, you'll find that John Ferak actually featured in the very first Mammothon. I think I had the pleasure of chatting with him as well. Yes, I did. But it wasn't a live chat. It was a pre-recorded. Anyway, I keep trying to get people to come on and have a chat, and I've got one or two more that I want to try and get a hold of. But I'll say the book, if you haven't got it yet, see, it's John Frack, Wrecking Crew, Demolishing the Case Against Stephen Avery. And yeah, John's a very, very good writer, and a keen supporter of the truth and justice, and a keen supporter of us and our community, who he calls the Justice Warriors. Anyway, I think that's enough for me for today. I hope you enjoyed that little bit of the book. Very, very, very interesting, isn't it? You know, when you're looking for who could have killed, who would have had motive to get rid of Teresa Halbach. I don't think we need to look much further, do we? Anyway, I'll say cheerio, and we'll catch you all soon. Bye for now.